Perfect.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, today we have Alexa Pena Vega. Alexa, it is such a sweet gift to see your beautiful face on the screen, for our listeners to hear your voice. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And I have been listening to you a whole bunch and for a while now. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Well, before we get into that, just you are, everybody knows you as an actress, as an entertainer. Your name is out there, but where are you right now? You are in Hawaii
Yes.
having a
So we
season
split
of
our time.
rest.
Yeah, we split our time between living on Maui and actually living on a boat in Florida, which
Mhm.
has been very exciting. We're kind of in a we're in a very busy season. God gave us a lot of rest. Obviously, I think He gave a lot of people a lot of rest over the last couple years. But
Mhm.
we've definitely hit the ground running. So we're kind of enjoying the downtime that we have right now before we have to take off again.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to hear that because I know you guys have been busy. You guys released a book this last fall
We
called What If
did.
Love is the Point? I'll just say, you guys, I read it. It was a really sweet, like bath time companion. It was just an easy read, but so fascinating. And then this week, I just listened to it on Audible while I was driving my kids all over the place, and it is a joy. I just suggest listen to it because you get to hear Lex and Los's voice tell their story, and it's so God honoring and powerful to hear your stories of surrender to God and the favor that's on your lives in Hollywood and in acting. But at the core of it, you guys are choosing Jesus and he's using you in this very public way. But it's so clear that the root system of your life is grounded in a life surrender to God. And I would say just your journey as a wife and a mom, it's just so clear to see that. So I just want to thank you as a sister in
Thank you
Christ
so much.
for holding on to that anchor and for giving him glory by the way you choose to live, because it's very clear in the book, and just knowing you briefly from through friends of friends, it's just very clear that you choose him. So yeah, cheering
Thank
you guys
you.
on.
I'll take that
Mhm.
encouragement. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And now we're connected kind of through friends and through the internet. And it's just so fun to be able to be talking to you on the podcast about maybe the meaning of marriage, the meaning of God's design, and how he's working in our families. So I would love to hear what you've been learning about marriage and about kind of living that surrendered life and anything
Yeah.
that's bubbling into the surface as we kick this conversation off.
We just celebrated 9 years of marriage. We're going now into our 10th. Um,
Wow.
and it's been a wonderful marriage, but it's for sure had its roller coasters of ups and downs. And it's funny. The biggest thing that we always talk about and search for is community and surrounding ourselves with the right people. And about a year or 2 years ago, I think, I got a phone call from Alyssa Bethke, who was putting together kind of this group of girls to just encourage one another. We call it the sisterhood. And we, right before I went to the sisterhood, I really just started pursuing my marriage in a different way. Like, I'd always try to honor Carlos by, cooking things for him, helping him around the house with certain things that he normally does, just trying to show like his love language is acts of kindness. So I would try to show him all the acts of kindness that would just bring him joy and love. But the one area that we would kind of keep missing each other in happened to be the just like sex. Like, yeah, I would enjoy it, but it wasn't like this thing that I craved all the time. And obviously, he's a man, so he's like, I want you to want me. So, right
Yes.
before the sisterhood, I would say like it's about a month or two before, I really just kind of started trying to own, I guess, the sex part of our marriage a little bit more and really work on that. And it wasn't necessarily because I was gung ho and ready for it, but it was one of those things where this is going to sound terrible, but how like you don't want to necessarily go to the gym at the beginning, but then once you start going, you're like, I have to go every day. This is great. I feel good. My body feels good. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how it started. Like, I knew I had to do this for him, and it all started with one comment that he made. And the reason I'll bring it back to the sisterhood in a second, but he made one comment and he said, and I knew this is kind of when we were in trouble, and I didn't think we had any issues in our marriage, but he said, I just keep praying to God that He'll take away my like hunger for sex. And I just remember like going back, even saying it out loud, like I'm gonna cry. I remember going back to the bathroom and just like sobbing for him because I'm like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
my poor husband, like he's literally asking God to like take that urge away from him. And
Wow.
like, why am I not like there on his level? Um, oh, sorry.
Yeah. Wow.
It
Yeah,
just,
it strikes a deep place.
yeah, it hurt my heart because, you know, as wives, like we really want to serve our husbands. We want to be there for them. We want to show up. But like, I just do feel like society and the enemy knows like, oh, this is an area that I could totally get in. And it's something that, and you explained it so well. Like we grow up, if you've grown up in the church, like you wait until marriage, you don't really talk about sex. Sex is this like off limits thing, right? And then all of a sudden you get married and you're just supposed to be gung ho about it. So like we have these weird feelings and ideas towards sex. Like it's almost like we think sex is bad, and now all of a sudden we're supposed to think sex is good, but then all of a sudden sex feels dirty, and like you just have all these weird feelings, right? And
Yes.
it's very confusing. So he made that comment and it hit me hard. So I started trying to dive in and I really struggled. Obviously, this is before I knew you, really struggled with finding resources for Christian women. I found that the resources for Christian women that I happened to like when I like looked it up on the internet, they were not giving me really anything that I found to be helpful. I ended up finding this other podcast, which was the furthest from a faith based podcast whatsoever. But I was able to just be like, God, like, give me help me just pull what I need from this. Um,
Yes.
and they just gave me some like ideas and things that could help like loosen me up a little bit more and free me. But it still wasn't it. But
Mm.
I knew that I would like listen a little and then I had to turn it off because I was like, this is gonna be like bad because some of the advice I was like, this is not
Yeah.
good at all. But I took what I could from it and it really opened us up. And I'll explain kind of everything that happened from there. But then a couple months later, I go to this women's retreat and I just opened up and told the girls kind of like what happened and how our love life had completely 180'd after that comment and after I started making efforts. And what blew my mind was the amount of women in the group who were like, I'm here. What did you do? What are you doing right now? Like, how can we make this better? And we all just kind of started talking about sex. And never in a million years did I think I'd go to a sisterhood and all of us are just talking about sex. But it ended up being so awesome and freeing and encouraging
Wow.
to where afterwards I had different women calling me saying like that conversation was exactly what I needed and my husband thanks you because our marriage is in a whole new place now. And then that's when I think Alyssa was like, I'm gonna find somebody who really knows this subject. And then all of a sudden, I heard that you were part of the group, Francie, and I started looking up your stuff. And I have to say, like your podcast, I wish I'd heard about that sooner. Obviously, like timing is everything, and it all worked out. But your podcast is exactly what women need, and not just women. I told Carlos, I'm like, you have to start listening to some of these episodes because they are so freeing and opening, but ultimately it comes down to the holiness of marriage. And it's funny because we always tell people that marriage is so holy, but you don't really think about holiness in the bedroom. You just think about holiness as like you're married, it's beautiful, you eat together, you walk together.
You
But
go to church together, you
yeah,
sit in the pew.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. You don't really think about like,
that's
all right,
holy.
God, I'm gonna bring you into the bedroom. It's almost as
Yes.
if we like shut the door on God when we walk into the bedroom when it
Wow.
should be the exact opposite. And
Yeah.
you really taught me that with
Mm.
your podcast. Like you really did. So and I'm talking a lot, so cut me off at any time, Francie.
No,
So
I'm just
jump
so blessed to hear your story because this is ministering to me, just what God has done and what he's
Yay.
teaching you. So keep going.
Okay, so to go back to after Carlos made that comment and I started kind of just trying to like learn different things and the one advice that I did get from this one podcast that I will not recommend, but I happened to get a blip of good advice. Was just talking about exploring each other's bodies, and that was something that like yeah, we made love and it was beautiful and we've had like amazing moments, but there was never a time where we were super vulnerable, where it's just like,
Yeah.
hey, we're actually going to take the next like hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, however long this takes. And
Yep.
I just want like to explore your body. I want you to explore mine. I want to know what you actually like and what you don't like. So and
Yeah.
by the way, I think I'm like 7 months, 6 months pregnant at the
I love it.
time.
I
Um,
love it.
but I put on something that I felt sexy in at my
Mhm.
6 months pregnant body. And I like set the room lighting or whatever. And he was obviously very excited because he's like, what is happening right now? And I told him, I'm like, I'm kind of embarrassed and definitely nervous, but you know, I just want us to explore and have fun and not worry about anything. And I want to ask you questions. I want you to ask me questions and like be honest. And it was one of the most freeing and beautiful experiences that we've ever had. And it was sexy and fun and hot and all the things that it should be, right? But
Wow.
it's so funny because, like, we're exploring and, he's like, actually, I don't like that. Like,
Mhm.
what? Like,
That's
in
so
the
good.
almost 10 years that we've been together, I always thought that you did like that. He's like, yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
finally feeling free to say, like, I like
We can.
this. I don't like this.
Yeah.
Can we change? Can we move in the positions that we're in? Like,
Yeah.
it was incredible. And I don't think we always feel free to say
Wow.
things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That is amazing. Was that exploration, like, did you find that you had other days where you tried that again? Was it that one was enough to kind of give you fodder for a while? What did
I
that
think
look like?
so. At this point, I think, what was it, like almost 2 years ago now, or I don't know how long ago it was. But it it was definitely the one to kind of allow us to be free,
It's like a
in
turning
the
point.
sense that that now when we're in our intimate moments, we do feel we can be vocal. Like, we can say like, oh,
Yes.
actually, can we move or can we change? Just,
Yeah.
just because I don't feel like, oh, well, he's happy right now, but at the end of the day, like, this is about both of us. And just
Yes.
feeling comfortable enough. I think that would be it. Feeling comfortable enough to say, hey, let's try this, or let's do that, or let's do something a little different, or even comfortable enough where, oh my gosh, the kids are totally fine. Somebody's here watching them. Let's just sneak away. Like, we only have 10 minutes, but let's sneak away real fast. And
Yeah.
something that I love that you did that, I think we've only done a couple times, but it's such a good idea, is when you're in a fight and you're like, all right, we need to reconnect.
Mhm.
And you have your intimate moment. Um, we have had a couple of those, but I'm not gonna lie, it is hard. Sometimes I don't know how you're able to do it because I have been working on trying not to hold a grudge, but when I feel hurt, it's like an
Yes.
open wound. So
It's
I
very
almost,
vulnerable.
yeah, it's so vulnerable. And I don't necessarily want to say like everything's fine. And I used to do that. And I think that's kind of my flesh where I'm struggling because I used to be, and I still fall into it, like people pleasing. So even though I'm not fine, I'll be like, it's okay, it's okay. So
Yes.
I've had to grow a lot to get to a point where I'm like, no, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
um, but finding the balance of saying, I'm not okay, but we need to fight for us, even though this sucks right now. So I'm not okay. This was not okay. I don't like this, but we need to be unified.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Joyce and Clifford Penner?
I
They're
have
in their
not.
80s. They are
Oh my
sex
gosh.
therapists. They were
Are
the
you
like the
serious?
first, yes,
Oh my
they were
gosh.
the, you have to look them up because they're great resources, but they were the first like kind of pioneers of sex therapy in the Christian world in the 80s. And I just listened to a podcast of them the other day. And in my language, we'll say like we choose connection, but they said it so sweet. They're like, sex is not always preceded by desire. It's preceded by decision, and a
Mm,
decision to connect and knowing that it is good. And I think what you're hitting on too is learning your voice, whether it's about pleasure or about pain,
yeah, so
physically or
true.
just emotionally, and knowing that sex is like intimacy is like the hub of the wheel, and there's all these spokes that come out, and sexual activity is one of those hubs, but intimacy is that place of like vulnerable.
Yes.
And I'll even share something really vulnerable, because this is like the most vulnerable. I've never had a friend be so vulnerable on my podcast. So thank you
Oh,
for just
really? Oh my
opening up.
gosh.
Yeah.
We're open books, girl.
Yeah. Okay. So this is real life, because I think maybe one of the things that the Christian world needs is people sharing real life and
Yes.
not anecdotes or kind of
100%.
distant. And so real life, we have been through the ringer the last many years. It's been a very hard season. And we used to do date night every night. That was like our way of setting apart time, whether we're high or low or tired or whatever. It was a window of time to connect from 8 to 9. Then our kids got bigger and we're having to like minister their hearts at night. We're tired. And so we've switched to hotel dates every week. And so we go to a hotel for like 4 or 5 hours one day a week. And we do what you like, we still do exploration, and we're still learning in different seasons, and even the power of sex in grief,
Mm.
and the power of sex in trauma,
Mm.
and the healing provision that God gives us in intimacy. So sometimes sex is not like the high orgasmic, like blow your mind, hot, amazing. And sometimes it's the holiness of having an orgasm and then weeping in each other's arms, because you're like processing trauma through your body and through vulnerability and
So
through,
vulnerable.
it's like the therapy, the intimate therapy of marriage, where you're fully known and you both know each other's hearts. And it's so powerful. And what the world claims about sexuality is just such a joke compared to the power of married sex and what it does for your body, your pleasure, your health. But we had an experience recently at a hotel date where usually I am the massive receiver, because we realized that the pace of my pleasure has everything to do with the health of our marriage. And like, as a man, and the truth of masculinity, and the world and even the church puts men on top and men in charge and men as like the honcho of sexuality. But how God designed it really is the woman is like the sexual queen, because the penis
I remember
has
you
4.
explaining this, by the way, because I
Yeah.
didn't know all the things, and I'm like, wait a minute, what? And I meant to look this up, and I never did. But when you were like just explaining, like, and I'm sorry, I know girls, like, we're really going there. When you were explaining like the vagina and the clitoris and everything, I was like, what? There's so many things
So
I
much
didn't
pleasure
know.
potential. And not only like down there's recent, and this is just blows my mind. This is off topic, but did you know that science, even, it's not just like church thought is behind, but science is behind on women's pleasure, which means the world is behind and so messed up on what pleasure is from the pornographic culture. But science, it wasn't until this year that the human female clitoris got anatomically mapped. Do you know what they used for scientific research on the clitoris information?
What?
A cow clitoris.
Why? What?
Isn't that insane? Because even science is like not caught up to the glory and beauty and power of a
I'm
woman's pleasure.
sorry.
And
So
so it
for
gets,
how many years
for
we've
all
been
of human
using a
history,
cow?
it wasn't until all of human history, it wasn't until I'm learning this, because this is how geeky I am. I'm like, I have to map out church history and the history of sexuality and celebration of God's design and pleasure. And then I also have this urge to map out medical history, because
Great.
both of them are jacked up. Both
Yeah.
of them have been, and it just tells me, when I think of the story of God, it tells me how threatened darkness is by a flourishing female.
Mm.
And even the scientific community, because they, for a long time, it was like thought of really inappropriate for a male doctor to see a female. And so they would take the midwife's understanding of like what a female anatomy was. But it wasn't until 1844 that a female anatomy was sketched in detail. And that was what was in science books for a really long time, 1844. But it's, even science is behind. So it was just this year that a female clitoris got mapped. And until then, it was known that a woman had 8,000 nerve endings. That's a cow's clitoris. A female clitoris, human, has over 10,000.
Are you
So
kidding me?
way more than half the pleasure potential of a man. And then not only that, but women have erogenous zones all over our whole bodies. And so basically, Carlos could enjoy your body for hours and he would be thrilled, and you would be thrilled at the slowness, at the pace of your pleasure, because as a man, our men were designed to host and serve our beauty. And we
Mm.
were designed to share our beauty and receive. And so what you guys tasted in that encounter
Yep.
is like really good and meant to even be more. And I think as a woman, we're trained to kind of be quiet about our
Right.
needs, our feelings, and if you're like too loud, you're too loud. But I'm a people pleaser too. I am definitely err on that side. And the last year, I've been on this huge, deep journey to healing because anxiety was about to take over my life. And I realized it a year ago, just due to a lot of hard things my family's walked through. I was absorbing everyone's stuff and it was being stored in my body. And I talked about this in a public episode a couple weeks ago on the 1st of January about in my journey with anxiety, but I realized it was shutting me down sexually. And part of it was that I wouldn't tell Wyatt about it. I wouldn't share it because I felt like it was going to be another burden on him. And I needed to just take care of it myself.
Yeah.
But what I realized is not only was I not using my voice about my struggles, I also wasn't using my voice about pleasure. And I wasn't using my voice in a lot of other areas. And so, like, the sexual avenue of our marriage helped me see I need to use my voice in a lot of areas to be
Everywhere.
a healthy female.
Yeah.
And when I'm more healthy in articulating desire and even connecting to my need of I need this, not this. I'm not well today. I really need a massage, not intercourse, whatever it might be. He is blessed because his masculinity was made to serve my femininity. And
Mm.
just like Adam was created, out of the side came this woman. We kind of think of her as his helpmeet, meaning she serves him, but he's actually meant to host her beauty and to bring it in and to care for it because she's the pinnacle of creation. Like she was the final one. She has triple the times of like pleasure power than he does. And it's like God just outdid himself
Yeah.
so that she could express beauty that would bless this union. And I don't know, that's something I've been learning lately. And
I
our
love
little
that.
hotel dates have given us space to kind of go at the pace of my pleasure because you
Mhm.
have little ones, I have little ones, trying to grow intimacy and not just hold on, by our fingernails. Trying to grow is a whole nother ballgame
Yeah.
rather than just survive. And so
Yeah.
it is like those longer experiences of saying, let's explore, let's see the goodness of God here and what is hidden in this gift. It's like a surprise package that we just didn't even know we could open.
Wow. Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so we kind of had something a little bit like that a few months ago, after this like crazy season. We were like, no, we're taking a trip, just the two of us. We have not done
Yay.
that since before we had kids.
Mm,
And no one else, no friends are coming, nothing. This is just for you and me, and we're going. So we ended up
so
going
good.
on this week-long cruise. And when I say everything tried to get in the way of us going on this
Mm,
cruise, everything. I'm talking job opportunities were coming up, like offers, all these things, like basically don't go, don't go. We just said no. We turned jobs down. We figured things out with our kids to where they had the proper care that they needed, and we just left. And we always laugh now, like since then, because we're like, that was the best time of our lives.
oh
Because for a
my gosh.
whole week, I was with my partner, like my teammate, and it was holy. It really did feel holy. It was restful, it was beautiful, it was fun, and honestly we felt like we were dating and like just like in the beginning of our relationship, just having a blast. We had so much fun
Mm,
together and not having that rush. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you were like, you can't really grow when you're just at home in your day to day, because we have three kids, 6, 3, and 1, and they always need something. And you're
yep.
so zonked. And by the end of the day, honestly, the last thing I want to do at the end of the day is have like 2 hours of sex. Like, I'll give you 15
Bless.
minutes tops, but I want to go to sleep. Like, I want to enjoy my husband. But we also know, like, the next morning we're going to be fried if we're up too late. So, there's some mornings or some evenings where we're just like, that's okay. We'll stay up later and enjoy each other. But then, of course, the next day it is exhausting and you're
Yeah.
still in the thick of it with kids. So, really taking that time and going, you know what? If I have to set cash aside to be able to have these little hotel dates where we do leave for a few hours and get to grow together, it is
Mhm.
so important. And it's funny because, well, I just think so much of like how the enemy just wants to destroy marriage, like hates
Mhm.
that unity, right? But I think of like a successful marriage, what that actually does for the world, it changes the world. You see a successful marriage, not only is the wife flourishing, but the husband is flourishing. They go off, the two of them, whatever business ventures they're doing, those business ventures soar because they feel completed, they feel whole, they feel supported. So even when something goes wrong, they can come up with resources to fix it because they have that teammate, that base that they can go back to, right? So I just think of, like, it's so funny how sex is, I think, like the number one stronghold across the board, whether it's in a marriage, it can make or break a marriage, or like you look at today, how pornography has a hold over the whole world. I think it's like what's the number one? I think that's like the number one thing on the internet. The
Yeah.
industry overall is
Billions of
pornography.
sites.
Yeah,
Yep.
billions and
Mhm.
billions of dollars. Um, Somebody said like every 30 minutes there's like a new something, some like new video or something ridiculous comes up. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, we just live in such this dark world where, but the enemy knows like this is the resource that could either make or break somebody. So I'm gonna take over, and honestly, I feel like that's what we're seeing. So it makes me sad that in the faith-based world, we don't really talk about it a whole lot, and
Yeah.
yet where kids are learning sex and all the info that they want to learn from is through like pornographic, non-holy spaces
Yeah.
because they need their questions answered. I'm like, no, we got to figure something else out. Like, we got to make it a safe, like, obviously at the right time for like teenagers and whatnot, but they have to be able to ask questions and feel comfortable asking questions because today's world is wild.
Yeah, and to parent, what is required for us? Like I literally this morning had one of my kids to myself for a couple hours, and I just went there in this very conversation with her because I'd been in kind of in my head. I'm like wondering what her friends know, what's being talked about in her circle. They're all like teetering on this iPhone stage, and just like I can't hide them. I want
No,
so much to put
it'd
them in
be
a
so
bubble, but
nice to
it
scoop
is
them up and just keep them sheltered, right?
impossible. And I
Yeah.
think the only reality is that I have to have conversations so they're more educated than their friends and they understand the reality, not just like porn is naked people, but this is what viewing porn does to your brain. This is the
Yep.
addiction centers it turns on. And this is the result of people who viewed porn. Now they can't function sexually in their marriage. Now these are the results. And so letting them see and saying, hey, your body will respond because God made bodies beautiful. And he made us all sexual people, and sexual desire is natural and beautiful and good. And curiosity is natural and beautiful and good. But this is the way that God designed it to be celebrated. And the enemy hates it so much that he's trying to pervert it on every level.
Every
And so
level.
just kind of squaring with my kids, this is the world we live in. I wish it wasn't. But I want you to know more than your friends. I want you to understand when you see an image, this is the agenda. This is the agenda of iPhones. This is the agenda of Facebook and Twitter. They're trying to get you, Instagram, get you hooked with the
Yep.
scroll. And this is what's happening in your brain. And I think if we can personally, and what I'm hearing in you is like get to a point of celebrating it in our own
Mhm.
lives,
Yeah.
we have a tone of celebration for our kid. And celebration trumps fear every time.
Yep.
And fear is kind of makes them be like, my mom's freaked out about this. Can't really talk to her.
Right.
She's nervous. She gets all flushed. But if we can say, this is God's design,
Yeah.
his territory, this is the strategy of the enemy, they can, I think, I don't know. It's an experiment. I'm still in it.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
times are changing so
Kids are
fast.
smart though. I really do feel like, and I think you got it, but I do feel like sometimes parents don't really give them enough credit for how much
Mhm.
they are willing to take in. Like even my 6 year old, the things that I don't even realize like he's listening sometimes. And he comes back later on and asks me questions over a conversation that like we may have been having. And I'm kind of, my jaw usually hits the floor because I'm like, oh my gosh, you were listening. Okay, so now I have to explain this. I mean, for instance, the other day, he's been asking a lot about like dying, because he's understanding now like life and death, right? So we explain heaven and how beautiful heaven is and all this stuff. So we're at the airport and he's super close to the curb, and I said, Ocean, I need you to take a step back, baby, because if a car comes and you're too close, it could hit you, and then you'll go. And I just like made a splat noise because I didn't want to say you're gonna die. But he goes, oh, I would die? And
Mm.
I'm like, yeah, baby, a car could hit you and it could kill you. And he goes, well, that's okay because I would just go to heaven. And I honestly didn't really
Yeah.
know how to respond to that. And I'm like, okay, well, that is very smart. So I just said, "You're right, baby. You would go to heaven, but I would miss you a lot." And he goes,
Mhm.
"Well, then you could just get in front of the car, and then you could go to heaven too."
They're black and white thinking. It's
I'm
really
like, "Oh
simple, mom.
boy." So I just kind of laughed, and to be honest, I didn't know how to respond, so I just hugged him because as a parent,
That's
sometimes
perfect.
you just don't have the answers and you don't really know what to say. But they are smart and they want you to be honest with them. They want you to tell the truth, obviously, all in
Yeah.
proper time, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that that's something, especially, we don't know how we're going to have the conversation with our kids when they're older. It is something that we've laughed about and we've talked about, and we just had a little girl. She's one, so we have two older boys
Yeah.
and now a little girl, and they obviously see that there's something different about her. Kingston keeps
Yeah.
asking where her wiener is. He doesn't understand like why her wiener isn't there. What did he say? He goes, "She has a flat wiener." She has a flat wiener. um,
Kind of. Kind
yeah,
of.
kind of. But they call it. He can't.
That's
We kind of sorry. We say coochie, but he can't say it, so he calls it a tucci. So now we say Rio has a tucci,
oh,
and you
that's
have
so
a
cute.
wiener. So we're learning anatomy in our house. That's the level that we're at
Yes.
right now.
It was fun.
But to shift, I'm going to totally shift back to a little bit about what you were talking about with like intimacy, and it's funny because my husband is not the husband that where like if we want to be into like he won't just have sex to have sex. He wants that intimacy. He really wants it. But if I'm not in it or I'm not connected, he can't. Like, he doesn't want to keep going. He's not that guy who's like, I just need sex. He
Yeah.
has to be connected, which is beautiful. I'm so thankful that God gave me a husband who desires that connection because he forces me to be connected, like, as opposed to just kind of like, all right, I'm going to please my husband or I'm just going to give him, the sex
Emotions.
that he wants right now. He's like, stop. Like, I want you to kiss me. We always laugh because I'm like, okay, chick. And he's like, no, I want to feel connected with you. I want like he wants that beautiful intimacy that comes from a relationship, not
Yeah.
this pornographic view of what
Yeah.
people have or what the enemy has done to sex. And I really do have to like give major props to my husband because when we first started dating, we were both really discovering Jesus at the same time. I kind of
Mhm.
loosely grew up with him. Carlos really didn't at all. Came to Jesus and I met him a week later, and we both met at the same Bible study where it was our first Bible study together. So our journeys were really we were both at the starting line with
Yeah.
God and really growing together in God, growing together with one another. But what was awesome was pretty quickly. Obviously, he was a young man, so he didn't know like I shouldn't look at porn. It was just such a part of the world that we lived in and that he lived in. We didn't really have a lot of faith based friends. So at the time, that was something that was just a part of his life. And the more and more we grew with God, he was like, yeah, no, this isn't right. And this isn't for me. And I didn't have to be the one that was like, you can't look at that stuff anymore. Like, whatever. Like, he did that on his own and never went back. And he'll tell you, like, he's like, that stuff will destroy you. It just gives you such a perverted idea of what intimacy is supposed to look like. It also desensitizes you. And I also really strongly believe that's why we have so many issues revolving around pedophilia, is because at some point you become so desensitized that
Yeah.
these images aren't enough, that they have to go deeper and explore all these other weird, crazy options. And I really do believe that's why we're in this crazy place.
Yeah.
And in the world that we're in right now. It's
Yeah.
ultimately because of pornographic stuff.
Well, as you were mentioning, just in terms of Loso's sweetheart, I just love him. I don't know him, but
I know.
what I think he is expressing and that he doesn't have the language for is that sex connects to the soul in a way that we don't give it credit for. And Wyatt and I've toyed a lot with the language of this because there's not really a lot of writing out there about it, but like the soul of your sexuality and the soul of a masculine heart and a masculine body, and that a true man is not looking at the core of him is not looking for sex just to get off. He's looking to be known. And that is one of the avenues of being known vulnerably. And also as a man, feeling like he's wanted and that he's good enough. He might not be able to express that. But if you're just doing a chore, like a lot of us were kind of raised in this idea of like, it's just a chore, it's just a man's need. Even
100%.
Christian books with the best of intentions kind of framed it as it's a man's need. And if we as women are disconnected from our desire in our body, and we can't even locate desire in our body, like it's kind of numb, I don't feel a lot, and I'm really tired, then of course it'll just be like, okay, you need it, all right. But what he's expressing, I think, is like an opportunity that I've seen as a wife in Wyatt, who has had very similar sentiments of, I get as a woman to affirm his masculine soul through sex, through words of affirmation during intimacy, through even like physical touches throughout the day that show him he's desirable and desired. And that it keeps things flirty, it keeps the sexual energy going, but he's like, you're touching my soul right now. And when I learn about sex, like I'm sure when you listen to that podcast, even though it's a little raunchy, you were spitting out the bones, eating the meat, he probably felt deeply loved because you were pursuing his soul on a level that is more than, I love you, honey. It's connected.
Well, what was crazy was, so after our like 2 or 3 hour exploration night, right? Which was amazing, which I learned so much about myself that I had never, like, because I allowed myself to explore for the first time. I didn't know that boobs had sensation. It was like, I just always used them for breastfeeding. They were never anything else. And so
just utilitarian. No, they're more than that.
Like, they have so many, again, the nerve endings. It's beautiful.
Nerve endings. Your whole body is orgasmic, basically, by the way.
But it's incredible that our bodies are just these beautiful vessels that we just don't give them enough credit for, right? And again, it's not dirty. Like, it can be dirty. The world makes it dirty, but not in the holiness of your marriage. I think like it was just so beautiful. But I remember afterwards, the next day, like she just came up to me and just hugged me so deeply, but in a way that, like, we hug each other and we love each other, whatever. But like, I think it was that, and I could totally be wrong, and I'm curious because he's over there. I don't know how much he's listening, but it felt like a hug of like, I felt known, or I felt heard, or I felt seen. It was just it was a different kind of hug. I don't know how to explain it. But it goes back to that, like, true intimacy that we experienced unlocked like a new level of our marriage, because it did allow us to grow, because it's very easy to, just like anything, you plateau, you have to find a way to break through and get to that kind of next place. But now, like, I love flirting. It makes such a difference when he grabs me or he plays with me during the day, or like huggy or kissy. And also, I want my kids to see us flirting. I want them to see this healthy marriage where daddy hugs mommy, or he's like loving on her, cuddling her, giving her kisses, because I want that for them. I want that intimacy for them when they're older. I want them to feel like loved and heard and known. And if we can be that example now, and I don't think a lot of people really understand how much kids are taking in right now.
Absolutely.
They take in everything. And one of the big things, when people are like asking me, how do I teach my kids about God? I'm like, well, just live out what like your day looks like with God. Pray out loud. Like, don't hide your prayers. Say prayers in front of them. So for me, like, I'll be cooking in the kitchen and I'll just start talking to God, and my kids will look at me, and sure, I might look like a crazy person to anyone else, but they know, like, mommy's talking to God, so I can talk to God whenever I want, right? So we have an opportunity to constantly be teaching our kids and raising up like beautiful, strong, fearless kids. And honestly, it starts even with just a little flirting at home with your spouse.
Yeah. As you're talking, like, I'm having new thoughts of just maybe, because we're all afraid for our children. We're like, this is weird time to be raising kids. Like, how do you raise them with clarity? And I feel like maybe the antidote to sexual confusion is sexual celebration. And obviously you're not going to like get naked in the kitchen in front of your children, but you could be flirting, or little neck kisses, or just a sense of that you celebrate embodied
Yep.
love.
Yep.
And that communicates to your children, this is good.
Yes.
And as they get older, they'll realize my parents know something that is good. And
Yep.
time will tell that sexual confusion doesn't lead to goodness, it leads to
Right.
brokenness,
Yes.
whatever that looks like, the confusion of
Yep.
pornography or the whole gamut of confusion that we're facing right now.
Yes.
But if we learn to celebrate it in our own bodies,
Yep.
blessing our beautiful bodies, agreeing with the fact that we're good, and then celebrating our husband's masculine strength, receiving his celebration of our feminine beauty, and having that sense of awe before God of what he's made. I don't know. I kind of have this faith like that's got to trump evil. Like
100%.
celebration and goodness can overcome confusion and
I agree.
brokenness.
I agree.
Mm.
Well, I mean, we all want to feel, ultimately, we want to feel loved. And even though we shouldn't be seeking out validation, we want to be validated. We want to feel like, you know, heard and seen and known. And ultimately, I do feel like that's where a lot of trauma and confusion stems from. Like if you don't have that at home, if you don't have a place where you feel loved and celebrated, and you don't like where you feel received instead of rejected,
Yeah,
I could tell you most of our trauma comes from rejection in childhood. And
right.
we have different forms of rejection that we've both experienced, and we talk about it in our book, but it has stuck with us into adulthood, and it
Yeah.
started from
Yeah.
childhood. So you're 100% right with kids need that celebration. They need that fun. Hello, like they get a sticker for doing a good job on the like a report or something.
Yeah.
That's celebration, right? Like we're teaching them from
Mhm.
kindergarten that if they do well, they get a sticker or they get a point or something good on the board, or whatever. So 100%, I really do feel like celebration is a way to say like this is good.
Yeah. So, speaking of little ones, what would you say are some of your things you've learned on maintaining marriage connection and kind of keeping that spark going when you have little ones all around and you're
Oh
traveling,
yeah.
you're on the boat? I mean, I can't even imagine like life on the boat. That would be so intense. And I think you're remodeling it. Is that right? Like
Oh,
it's not
yes,
even
thank God it's
a
over.
finished.
Yes, we were in the middle of a remodel while living on the boat. They call it a
Oh my,
refit. I
wow.
did tell Carlos that there are many things that I'll happily go with him through and like be right next to him. But I will never do a refit while living with kids on a boat again. I'm like,
That's
that's
so
something we
intense.
won't do again.
Yeah.
Just because it's hard. It's different than being in a house in the middle of like
Yeah. Where you have
construction.
a yard
It
to
was
go run
rough, right?
around.
Yeah, it was rough, but the fruit of it has been phenomenal and amazing.
Mm,
We as a family, specifically in our industry, it is not set up for families or marriages to thrive.
yep.
That's why I mean, across the board for so many industries, but specifically the entertainment world, you don't see marriages thrive very often because you leave for months at a time. You're in close quarters with the opposite sex. Obviously, whether
Yep.
you're playing like a husband or wife, in a movie or on a television series or whatever, um, it really opens the door to
Yeah.
destroy your marriage. And we discovered that very early on, and we knew like we cannot ever let our family be separated. And if we have to be separated, it is 2 weeks. That's it. Like we are not
Yeah.
we can't afford
Mm,
to allow that door to be opened, right?
yeah.
So we go everywhere together as a family, and it's not easy. It's really hard. It's exhausting. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
When people see our schedules, we went through a couple different nannies when we were on the road, and all of them were lovely and kind. But they'll tell you, they're like, I don't know how you guys do this schedule. It is
Yeah.
brutal. So the burnout rate is really high. But for us, we know what we're called to do. We feel like also like season isn't forever. So
Right.
while we're in this season, we're going to do what we're supposed to do, but we have to honor, obviously God, but we have to honor our family along the way. So, you know, it costs a lot more. It takes a lot more of our time and energy. Um, but we bring our kids everywhere.
Yep.
How do you have sex when your kids are with
Yeah.
you every moment of
Yeah.
every day and you're living in these close quarters? Um, we honestly have just found the time. And sometimes it's not possible. And it is just what it is. But very, very often you will be able to find little moments, and whether you're really tired or whether it might not be the most convenient, you make it work. And I think, and I'm so curious as to what Los would say. He's got his earphones on. I sometimes wish he could join us for this. um I'm so curious as to what he would say, because I really do feel like ever since that night, the night of exploration, like I don't know, I have to name that night because it was such a milestone in our
Special
marriage.
night.
It
Yeah.
was a special
Turning
night.
point.
But ever since then, I would say our love life has completely changed. It has soared. Like,
I love that.
I feel more confident. I feel sexier. Obviously, we still have our moments where I'm like, oh, I don't feel as cute as I would like to feel, because that's just human nature, right? But
Nice. Yeah.
I feel way more confident in
Yep.
those desires, and I feel way more confident in, like, pursuing or being the one to say, hey, let's go have sex, instead of it just being him, because that
Yeah.
sucks for a husband to be the one that's always asking for it. Like, be the
Yeah.
wife that pursues your husband.
Well, I love y'all's intentionality. I mean, for those of you who are listening that don't know, you guys went on a tour bus with your little ones, not just like
We did.
hotels, but like a tour bus for months while your husband's boy band. Um, I'm drawing a blank on the name right
It's
now.
okay. Big Time Rush.
Big Time Rush. I knew it was 3 letters. Big Time Rush was going all over the country,
Yes.
and your sweet family. And I love that. And I think I want to just close with something we mentioned before we went on recording about the mission of marriage and how God has a calling for our marriages. And you guys are in a spotlight season, but we all have a mission to our marriage. And what is at the root of our mission is intimacy and
Yep.
oneness and two becoming one. And I even like was praying for this, and I even mentally noted like your name, two became one, like PenaVega. That's his name, your name,
Oh, that's so
shoved
true.
together because you were two becoming one, and God's doing something new through you and
Mm,
generationally new through you. God's redeeming your stories. And that is just so powerful. But what is required is that diligence to guard your marriage, to guard your connection, because that is the source of fruitfulness, is
yeah.
unity.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, of just what God has given you guys? I mean, obviously you're making the choices for that. I think you've kind of already explained it, but I just want to emphasize how important that is and how powerful every family and is rooted in the marriage. And the marriage has a mission to take dominion and bring heaven to earth through
Yes.
whatever gifts, whatever yes we have, whether it's adoption or being in Hollywood or being a teacher or being a volunteer at your kid's school. There is an overflow of our marriage, and what that is stemming from is intimacy and oneness and that commitment.
I mean, I think it does go back to, what I was saying, where like you have to really choose in a world where you don't really see traditional families lifted up anymore. Marriages kind of put on this pedestal, like the way you would in, like, probably like the 30s or 40s. Marriage was this beautiful thing. Now it's like nobody gets married anymore. It's just kind of this
Right.
whatever thing. And they don't realize that they're missing out in this like beautiful holiness, this oneness that not only you get to experience as a husband and wife, but you get to like your family gets to experience. The fruit of that oneness is incredible. Um, what I will say is that it won't be easy. It's something you do have to fight for, because the world is not set up for successful marriages or successful families. It's just not. Actually, it's the opposite. Everything is
Yeah.
trying to destroy a successful marriage and destroy a beautiful family home. Like, we're seeing that in how everything is operating today. So, what I would say is it's going to take extra effort. It's 100% worth it. It might take extra effort, whether it's in your finances, because you have to make the decision to either bring your family everywhere with you or to not take certain jobs because you know it's going to pull you in a place that could open the door for something that you don't want to be opened. Um, yeah, I guess it's going to take sacrifice, but it's the sacrifice. How do I want to word this in a way that makes the most sense? Okay. I look at the Bible when I became a Christian, like a true Christian, not like the Sunday morning check the box whatever, but when I started really following Jesus, from a world standpoint, people would say like, "Oh, you sacrifice so much to follow God." And it's like, "No. like I didn't. I just gave up the things that were of the world to pursue the
Mhm.
kingdom, and what I gained was so much better. And I think it's the same thing with our marriages and with our family. You give up the
Yep.
things of the world that aren't going to help you or your family, and they feel maybe good in the moment, but ultimately long term they're not going to do your life any good. It's like eating junk food. Like Skittles might taste good, but
Yeah.
they're probably not going to
Yeah.
do anything good for you, right? um so for us as a family, we gave up the things that weren't really going to
Mm,
give our family life. Instead, we
yeah.
pursued life and we're
Yeah.
flourishing. So I guess it's less of a sacrifice, but it really mirrors kind of biblically what we're supposed to look like as believers.
Yeah.
I hope that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I love that. It's really not, it's like you don't pay, it's not really paying the price, it's receiving the reward because you
Yeah.
you are sacrificing something, but you're really receiving so much more that
Yes.
is life-changing, and also you have stuff to give away as a result.
100%.
And I think looking at your life, I think some people might be like, well, I'm not going on a tour bus every day or whatever. But for you and your calling, you guys are making intentional yeses and
Yes.
intentional nos that line up with the values of the kingdom in your sphere of influence. And I think for my family, it's nowhere near as out front, but we're making the sacrifice to say every week we're going to spend 4 or 5 hours in a hotel. That's our big yes. And we say no to other things in
Yep.
order to make that space, because
Yes.
we're coming out of deep trauma
Yep.
and a lot of chronic illness as a result. And so we're healing and we're saying yes to that and no to a lot of other things. And there's been seasons where it's like you just have to weigh your yeses and
Yep.
nos. And as I was getting to know your story just through your book, it seems like that's been just a really consistent theme since you've started following the Lord, is just this beautiful surrender,
Mm-hmm.
and that surrendered place before the Lord and trusting him for your sex life, for the health of your marriage, for the mission that he has for you, for the future of your children. It just comes down to that place of like open surrender.
Yep.
And time through your testimony, I've just seen like, wow, God really does move powerfully in ways that we wouldn't have prescripted, we wouldn't have known
Yeah.
were coming, but
Yep.
he uses our surrender. And so I just really appreciate your vulnerability. Do you have any last words that you want to share before we close
um
out?
I I don't think so. I think we covered a
We've
lot.
covered
Um
a lot of ground. That's great. Well, I'm just so grateful for you and Carlos, and I hope he does listen to this. And if you guys want to come back on together, it would be so fun to have a chat with you and Los and me and Wyatt. Maybe
that
some.
would be so fun. Have you ever done that? Have you ever had a
I've
couple?
never. I have done a few with Wyatt one on one in the early podcast days, but he's kind of a behind the scenes guy. Like everything we do in the podcast, we collaborate with 100%. Like we talk about the topic of sexuality, masculinity, femininity, God's garden dream, literally every day. Like there's not a day that goes by that we're not praying into something, having
That's
new
so good.
thoughts. It's wild how deeply it is ingrained in the way we're processing how we see everything in life. But he's like kind of behind the scenes guy. So maybe someday, but it
It's
would be
so
fun.
funny because like most people know Carlos as this up in front guy because, he's very outgoing and he is in a band and he's also an actor. Like he has this, but truly his heart is behind the scenes. All he wants to do is like direct and do things behind the camera that don't
Um,
put the spotlight on him, because if it were up to him, he's like, I don't want to be famous. I just, want to be able to make cool content and put things out there that
creative.
people like. And it just makes me laugh because like, oh, that's his heart. His heart desires to be behind the scenes, but I want him out in the front because I just know he has so much to offer. So much. So
Yeah.
I do feel like we should do that one day. That would be really fun.
Yeah. Well, it was such a joy to have you. Alexa, would you be willing to pray for our listeners and
Yes,
just the
please.
state
Yep.
of our marriages and our nation, whatever is on your heart?
Okay. Yes.
That
Okay.
would be amazing.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for Francie. I just want to lift her up to you right now, God. She is such an amazing vessel I'm so glad that you chose Francie because she just honors your word and your love so much. She is helping us in our marriage. She's transforming marriages around the world, and we know that's coming straight from you, God. So we thank you. God, for anybody who's listening today, I just ask that you pour into them, allow them to feel your freedom, your peace, allow them to have chains that are just completely broken so that they can feel that holiness within them, like that freedom that only you can give, so that they can go and explore with their husbands or wives. If there's men listening, I just ask God that you just allow everyone to feel that freedom, to where their voices are heard, that they're not afraid to be vulnerable with one another in their marriages, where they're just completely open in the way that we can go to you with absolutely everything. God, we just ask that the vulnerability and the freedom that we have with you, we have that in our marriages, because that is our safe place. Cover our families, God. Give us clarity in this season that we're in on how to talk to our children of today's world and today's confusion. We just ask that you strengthen all of us, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Alexa. And everybody listening, I encourage you guys to pray for the PenaVega family, for their protection, and for God's favor to continue to be upon them, because we're just grateful for the ways you guys are living surrendered and glorifying God in the public sphere. And we know that's not easy. So thank you. Thanks for being with us.